let me paint a picture for you. The waters are dark, they're suffocating, and they're eerily quiet. Well, except for the terrifying crackle of dragon fire. We are thrust immediately into the haunting aftermath of the Battle of the Gullet. I really want us to step directly into this devastation right now with absolutely zero preamble. We are looking at a watery grave. This is where the sheer, unadulterated horrors of war stop being these abstract political ideas discussed in safe, warm council chambers. No, out here, they are physical, they are visceral, and they are floating all around us.
And I mean, this just brilliantly illustrates the horrific human cost of this conflict. Just look at this terrifying, haunting underwater shot. We see the floating bodies of the fallen literally suspended in the murky depths. You've got capsized boats acting as makeshift tombs, and all of it is illuminated by this piercing, almost demonic glow of dragon flame that's just filtering down from the surface. I want to really emphasize this moment, because watching a poor, desperate soldier struggle to his feet on a burning, overturned hull, only to be instantly incinerated by a passing dragon, it completely redefines the stakes for us. You know, this isn't just a battle anymore, it's an absolute massacre. And the emotional devastation we're witnessing here, it's really merely a prelude to the psychological shattering that is about to hit Rhaenyra.
So, let's dive into the cost of the gullet and Rhaenyra's transformation.
I'm going to frame this entire narrative around a massive, irreversible shift in Rhaenyra's character. Because up until now, let's be honest, she has been locked in this sort of political paralysis, right? She was hoping against hope that full-scale war just wasn't the first or only option. But the gullet breaks that paralysis permanently. There's no going back. She has exhausted literally all her routes for a peaceful resolution, and yet this brutal slaughter still happened. We actually see this realization take physical form in what has to be one of the most soul-crushing moments of the entire story. Baela brings the crown prince home, but man, it is a victory that tastes entirely like ashes. We slowly watch as Jace's lifeless body is returned, just draped across Moondancer's saddle. I really want you to feel the raw, unfiltered grief of a mother here. A mother who suddenly realizes that the boys who used to hide their little faces in her skirts are now dying just so she can sit on a throne made of swords. And in her blinding, agonizing pain, she lashes out at Sir Laurent, her grief just violently overflowing.
Now notice the sheer depth of the performance behind these words. How could you do this to me? Answer me. I want to deeply analyze this moment because it is just a tremendous display of absolute shattering grief. I mean, taking Sir Laurent's life in this moment of blind rage isn't going to bring her son back, and deep down she knows it. So she just holds her boy and sobs. But it's exactly this shattering grief that becomes her ultimate catalyst. Daemon asks her the painful truth. Is she going to let her sons die in vain? And this agony is precisely what forces Rhaenyra to completely, finally abandon all her hesitation and make the move to claim King's Landing.
Moving on to dragons in desperation and the illusion of control.
Let's look at how this builds into the broader ripple effects of the battle. Because the world has fundamentally changed now. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding what King Viserys warned us about from the very beginning. Remember that? He believed that the idea of controlling dragons is an absolute illusion. They are a power mankind should never ever have trifled with. And the drastic, desperate actions being taken by our characters right now are beginning to spawn these massive, uncontrollable consequences. Let me explain exactly how this ancient warning applies perfectly to Rhaenyra. Here we have a desperate outcast teenager. She has always felt completely isolated from her family simply because she lacked a dragon. Well, in her desperation to finally prove herself, she has just secured the ultimate nuclear option by claiming the wild dragon Sheepstealer. And just look at how instantly this power corrupts and completely shifts the dynamics. You'd think claiming this beast would earn her family's acceptance, right? But instead, it essentially made Rhaena homeless. Lady Jane Eyre is furious about the arrival of this danger and of course the tragic death of Prince Joffrey, and she wants Rhaena gone immediately. But let me break down this incredible power shift for you. Rhaena, who was previously dismissed and incredibly vulnerable, completely seizes the moment. She uses the looming terrifying threat of Vhagar to exploit Lady Eyre's fear. She basically offers her own protection in exchange for compliance. She's forcing the Lady of the Eyrie to just look the other way, silently threatening that, hey, she could just jump on her new wild dragon and make it a very, very bad day for absolutely everyone. It's a chilling evolution of her character. Meanwhile, if we shift our focus to a completely different kind of desperation, we find Aegon and Larys out on the road. And they catch this chaotic, lucky break when Triarchy forces unexpectedly attack the caravan holding them captive. I want to really examine Aegon's bloody, violent escape here. He gets incredibly stabby, just letting out all of his pent-up frustration and rage. But here's the fascinating part.
Instead of fleeing Westeros to find safety, he obsessively insists on heading straight to Rook's Rest. Why? Because he so desperately needs to see if his dragon Sunfire somehow survived the battle. Aegon knows all too well that without his dragon, he is literally nothing. He needs to reclaim that lost symbol of his power, no matter the risk.
Which brings us to shifting tides of loyalty and the erosion of legacy.
Let's bridge the narrative right back to Dragonstone, where we can actually see how the power dynamics are actively flipping behind the scenes. We are witnessing the total erosion of legacy and the absolute crumbling of old alliances, which is leaving traditional power structures in ashes. And this moment brilliantly illustrates that shift. Daemon finally returns to Dragonstone, totally used to throwing his weight around and running the show, only to find that he has been completely outmaneuvered. Remember, he left Mysaria in a cell as a prisoner. And now, she is the Queen's absolute closest confidant. We witness this incredibly subtle but monumental shift when Mysaria hands Rhaenyra her crown, pointedly telling her to remember which of them has been truly loyal. Let me explain just how massive this is. Mysaria has completely bypassed Daemon's traditional assumed authority. When Rhaenyra explicitly states she does not need Daemon's approval anymore, the entire balance of trust is forever altered.
On the other side of this eroding legacy, we really need to slowly unpack Corlys Velaryon's haunting realization. He's standing alongside Alan, just watching the horrific fires consume High Tide. And you have to remember, High Tide wasn't just a castle. It was an incredible, priceless museum of his legacy. It was built from the literal treasures of his 9 legendary voyages. It was the physical manifestation of his entire life's work, the absolute peak of House Velaryon's wealth and power in the world. And as he stands there, watching it burn to the ground, the literal ashes of his life's ambition are swirling all around him.
Let me highlight the deep, tragic irony of this situation. Corlys turns to Alan and tells him, quite frankly, that he has nothing left to give him now. Nothing but his name. Alan Velaryon finally gets the fatherly acknowledgement and the noble title that he has spent his entire life silently yearning for. But he receives it only atop the smoldering ashes of the vast, unimaginable fortune that built their house in the first place. He inherits a grand legacy that has already been utterly destroyed.
Now let's look at blooded Harrenhal and Aemon's hubris.
Let's smoothly pivot over to the Riverlands, where a very different, very dangerous kind of tragic hubris is currently playing out. We are stepping right into the dark, massive shadow of Vhagar at Harrenhal, where ancient magic and raw, unchecked arrogance are about to violently collide. But before the violence even begins, we have to analyze this eerie, brilliant warning from Aelys Rivers to Daemon right before he departs for King's Landing. Daemon, being Daemon, offers to find a way to compensate her for her help, heavily leaning on standard royal rewards like gold and jewels. But Aelys's response is incredibly chilling. I ask for food and you offer me rubies, they'll never satisfy my hunger. Let me explain the gravity here. This heavily hints at her deep, unexplainable connection to the ancient, insatiable magic of Harrenhal's weirwood roots. These are roots imbued with the spirits of the dead ever since Harren the Black felled the groves centuries ago. It's a dark, terrifying promise that something far older and far hungrier is truly in control here. And right into that hungry maw flies Aemond. Let me break down Aemond's grand, totally destructive entrance for you. He doesn't just arrive and knock on the door, he absolutely roasts the garrison Daemon left behind and literally lands the largest living dragon in the world directly inside the castle walls. He storms right into the Great Hall, proving his absolute singular reliance on raw fear and brutal force. When the perpetually polite Sir Simon Strong simply tries to talk to him, offering to find some sort of satisfaction, how does Aemond respond? With cold-blooded murder. He steps close and ruthlessly stabs the old man before cutting down one of his sons. It's brutal.
But then comes the shocking, intensely satisfying reversal. In the utter chaos of the moment, Simon's other son manages to plunge a blade deep into Aemond's back. And notice the incredible visual poetry of the aftermath here. Think about it. Aemond, a prince wielding Aegon the Conqueror's legendary Valyrian steel sword. A prince riding the most terrifying gargantuan beast in the known world, carrying absolutely all the symbols of Targaryen supremacy. And he is brought completely low. He loses a massive amount of blood and physically crumples to the stone floor, totally and utterly helpless at the feet of Aelys Rivers, actually begging for her help before he passes out. It is the absolute peak of arrogant power, just completely and totally humbled in an instant.
Let's talk about the bloodless coup and Alicent's sacrifice.
We are going to transition back to King's Landing now, moving away from Aemon's bloody, arrogant assault in the Riverlands to examine Alicent's incredibly desperate, covert political maneuvering. She is literally risking everything to surrender the city and ensure a bloodless handover. Let me walk you through the horrifying physical and emotional gauntlet she has to endure to pull this off. First, she has to secure the loyalty of the City Watch by striking a highly dangerous deal with Luther Largent. But abandoning her protector to go do this leaves her incredibly vulnerable. She's actually ambushed in her own quarters by Jasper Wilde, and we, the audience, are forced to witness her endure a sadistic, terrifying assault by Wilde to buy precious time, before Grand Maester Orwyle thankfully intervenes. She barely survives this trauma, but she has no time to process it, no time to break down. She immediately pushes forward to persuade Queen Helena to stand down the wall guards, using this desperate hope that she might still save her daughter and granddaughter. It is a grueling, almost entirely invisible sacrifice.
And that massive sacrifice is exactly what paves the way for this awe-inspiring and utterly terrifying moment. Four fully grown dragons descending upon the Red Keep simultaneously. You have Rhaenyra on Syrax, Daemon on Caraxes, Ulf on Silverwing, and Hugh on Vermithor. Let me explain the sheer overwhelming scale of this for a second. Even without any armed resistance at the walls, the sight of these four massive, fire-breathing beasts buzzing the rooftops strikes a paralyzing existential fear into the small folk of King's Landing. It is an overwhelming, undeniable show of force. It's an arrival fit for a conquering queen, making absolutely any thought of resistance inside the city entirely futile.
And finally, the price of the throne and the final toll.
Let's move to the climax of all this and see how every single one of our narrative threads pulls tightly together right here in the throne room. Rhaenyra has arrived. She's mostly unopposed thanks to the Gold Cloaks remembering their old loyalty to Daemon. But now she must finally face the physical, grueling reality of actually securing her birthright. The political theory of being queen, that's over. The brutal, bloody practice has begun. And the crucial point we really must ask ourselves is this. Will the Iron Throne remake Rhaenyra, or will she somehow remake this corrupt patriarchal system? As she prepares to actually take her seat, she demands the usurper Aegon, seeking to finally satisfy her need for justice for her stolen throne and her murdered sons. But Aegon is gone. Instead, through a wild twist of fate involving Larys Strong, the true original architect of her lifelong misery is dragged from the Black Cells and presented to her, Otto Hightower.
What follows right here is an absolute masterclass in suffocating psychological pressure. Otto just pleads to get it over with. But Rhaenyra, now facing the harsh reality of taking a human life with her own two hands, visibly hesitates. She actually tells Daemon she isn't sure she can do it, but Daemon? He is absolutely thrilled to have a front row seat to his oldest rival's demise. He leans in and actively forces her hand. If you wish to rule, show them you don't waver. Let me explain how deeply, brilliantly manipulative this is. He is publicly backing her into a corner, forcing her to commit the brutal, bloody violence required by the crown in front of all these lords and ladies. He literally pushes Dark Sister into her hands, telling her that in this exact moment, in this act of violence, she will truly become queen. Right before that Valyrian steel blade falls, we hear Otto's chilling, profound final realization. Viserys could have never imagined what it's come to. This totally bridges the agonizing gap between the relatively peaceful, completely conflict-averse reign of King Viserys and this horrifying new, blood-soaked reality they're all living in. It is the tragic final acknowledgement from the very man who started it all that the political game they played has spiraled into an apocalyptic nightmare that has destroyed their entire world.
And then, the gruesome reality of ruling truly sets in. Rhaenyra's first swing is too low, resulting in this messy, horrifying hack into Otto's neck. She manages to correct her mistake on the second swing, taking his head, but she is clearly traumatized by the brutal act. She hands the bloody sword back to Daemon, who, without missing a beat, immediately uses it to silence Ironrod mid-sentence. But honestly, the most important moment of all is when Alicent, who has just sacrificed absolutely everything to give Rhaenyra this throne, is brought in and looks down at her father's lifeless body. The two women lock eyes, and Rhaenyra realizes in this exact terrible second that holding on to power requires completely abandoning the person she used to be. It forces all of us to ask one final, lingering question. After all this bloodshed, all this trauma, and all this betrayal, is the Iron Throne really worth the rot it creates in your soul?